Welcome, everybody, to the inaugural episode of the PnP Podcast. I will be one of your hosts, Colby Giacubeno, and I will be joined every other week that we get one of these done by Brett Roberts. Brett, how's it going, man?
You know, I never actually knew how to say your last name for sure until just now.
I get that a lot, dude. I mean,
I had guesses, but like I was just like I think in like letters anyway, so I never really verbalized it.
Yeah, no, I actually did a podcast yesterday with Troy Tauscher, and he actually started the podcast, and then once he got to bringing me on, he was like, wait a minute, we have to end this. I was like, I forgot how to say your last name. How do you say it? And I told him, and he was like, okay, I would have just completely butchered that. I've dealt with it my whole life. It's nothing new to me.
Yeah. You're the only one I know with that last name. So
That's for sure. But no, I mean, this is something new that me and you have been talking about for a little bit, and we kind of just, today we just said, hey, let's do it. It's just a way for a couple of guys that love to talk hoops get together and talk hoops. Hopefully, some people enjoy our insight and our opinions. If not, we're always up for the debate.
I feel like I have to clarify that I'm not Brett Roberts of Morehead State. For the first time ever in my life, I was mistaken for the number 58 draft pick in the 92 draft.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
I was hoping it would happen when I was 12. I just didn't know it would take 24 years to materialize.
Yes, that's for sure. Hey, but you're making a name for yourself. If you want to, just really quick, I'll have you plug it at the end. But just tell people about what your kind of your new website that you're going on, and you also have your other podcast, the Three Guard Rotation.
Yeah. Well, I've been writing for 6 years now, and I've done a lot of different things, and for a number of venues, Yahoo and Bleacher Report and others. But I've kind of just decided to spring out on my own now and try to build a podcast blog up real big to get us some traffic for our podcast. It's called the Three Guard Rotation. I'm still doing Maddox Sports, which is sports handicapping, but if you ever read my stuff, it does not have much of a sports handicapping slant to it. I just kind of cover the sports and give game previews, and it's a pretty good job. But, you can follow that stuff at themaddoxsports.com/blog. And it's a really good site for gamblers because my boss, that's what his forte is. But by no means do you have to be a gambler to enjoy the idea of, will a team cover a spread,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've checked it out, when you gave me the site, so I took a look at it. I'm not really big. I'm not knowledgeable in the whole gambling thing, but It's definitely a well-put-together site. It has a really good following, huge on Twitter. And then your three-guard rotation, I really like what you're doing there, kind of branching out on your own. You've had, multiple of your pieces land on the Team Stream, other big networks that picked it up. You put out great content. So, for those that are going to listen to this, definitely be sure to give Brett's other podcasts a listen. Take a look at him.
And follow Rashad on Twitter too. It's Shad on Sports, SHAD on Sports. He's not on Twitter a whole lot, but I'm trying to push him more there.
Yeah, definitely. He's a good basketball mind. I picked up on him in a few of your pods. So, but I guess to dive right into this, people are done hearing about us. They want to hear about basketball, probably.
Yeah.
So the Las Vegas Superbook released its annual over/under win totals for the 2016-17 NBA season. I tweeted out a couple tweets last night just of the top 8 from each from the Western Conference and Eastern Conference, how that rounded up. I think we can both kind of agree on both conferences, and I know it's hard for me to just say it, but in the East, you have the Cavs at number 1, Celtics number 2, Raptors number 3, Pistons number 4, Hawks at 5, Pacers at 6, Wizards at 7, Hornets at 8, and in the West, they rounded up as Warriors at 1, Spurs at 2, Clippers at 3, Jazz at 4, Blazers at 5, Russell Westbrook, a.k.a. the Oklahoma City Thunder, at 6, the Grizzlies at 7, and the Rockets at 8. So, I mean, just your initial thoughts of, I guess let's start in the East because that's a little bit of a mess. What were your initial thoughts on those top 8?
Well, I think that the top 3 is fairly solidified in most people's minds, and Cleveland, Boston, and Toronto are those teams. But I kind of put Indiana a notch above Detroit and Atlanta, who they have at 4 and 5. I'm not sure why people are so asleep on the Pacers. I still think Paul George is one of the best players in the league, and to me, that I put Indiana ahead of Detroit and Atlanta slightly, but I don't think that the win differences that Westgate put out on this is really all that much between those teams anyway.
Yeah, I'm not a really big believer yet on the Pistons. A lot of people are buying into them, heavily, and I know it's because of they'll have their full year with Tobias. Mm-hmm. Reggie Jackson, Andre Drummond, they continue to grow. And then, of course, you got Van Gundy is the really big reason behind all that, hype, I believe. I mean, he's a great coach. He knows how to put a team together. And me and you have talked before off the record. This team is looking more and more similar to Van Gundy's teams in Orlando. And we know what he did with them, just surrounding a block-dominant big man with shooters and guys who can kind of work off the dribble and kick out situations. So I think that's what makes them so dangerous. But like you said, Indiana, I mean, you can't go wrong. Paul George, is easily one of the best players in the league, second best small forward in the Eastern Conference behind LeBron, of course. I like their additions in Teague. I think he brings a little bit of a different dynamic than George Hill does. I think he's a little bit more assertive, which I think is what Pacers fans kind of wanted. And then, of course, they get, Thad Young, kind of give not a stretch 4 option, but an athletic 4 option. I'm really interested to see. I'm guessing they're going to bring Big Al off the bench. I mean, that seems like it makes the most sense. But if you have Thad at the 4 and Miles Turner at the 5, I mean, that's a pretty solid front court. Because Miles Turner is a lot more athletic than people give him credit for.
He's just figuring it out, really. I think in terms of what he can do on a basketball court. Because it's like sometimes defensively, it looks like on a play he's half asleep and he comes back and blocks the shot.
Yeah, exactly. And we're seeing how versatile he can be on the offensive end too. I mean, a lot of the pick and roll sets that they were running for him last year were pick and pops actually. And a guy his size, he really promotes a mismatch for other centers. So I'm interested to see with that. The only real problem that I don't think it's a huge problem, but is going to be outside shooting. Of course, they got C.J. Miles who can get hot. They have Paul George who can do his damage when called upon from 3. But other than that, who do you think is going to really stretch the floor for them? I guess that's
they do have Stuckey coming off the bench, and he is capable of throwing flames at times, but he's streaky.
Right.
Now there's not enough shooting on that roster. But I feel like you can bounce through half the teams in the East and say that at this point. I think we've become attuned to thinking so much of the shooting in this era that you forget that a team doesn't necessarily have to be stacked with shooters to succeed. And certainly Thaddeus Young can hit a 3 here and there, and Turner can step out and be a stretch 5 at times. And they can probably scrape up enough threes to get by. It is a team weakness. I mean, there's no calling anything other than that.
Yeah, and another thing that I'm interested in seeing is how Nate McMillan kind of coaches them, because of course Bird, made it pretty evident that he wanted to be a more up-tempo team, a lot of scoring, and McMillan's really known for having the slower-paced team. So I'm sure Bird gets the nod over what McMillan wants to do, but I guess what's going to be intriguing to me is how McMillan kind of adjusts to that. But I'm sure if he can build off what Vogel had going on there in Indiana, continuing the defensive philosophy, they can definitely, flirt with that around the top 3 in the East. That seed, Shane Young even has them as high as 2. I mean, I don't think they get that high, but of course, like we said before, you have Paul George on your team. I mean, so as long as you have a superstar, pretty much anything is possible. And then kind of looking at the rest of that, covering the Hawks, I'm a co-editor for Soaring Down South. I was kind of surprised that, I think it's a comfortable prediction to put them at 5. But, just being realistic, this team has a lot of dominoes that need to fall in the right place, I think, to really have a successful season. Now, they can fall in the right place, don't get me wrong, but I just think there's a lot weighing on, if Schroeder can be that calming presence at point guard, which he hasn't been so far. I think that's, when I was talking to Troy yesterday, that's a point that he brought up that I really admired, that Jeff Teague kind of brought that calming presence as a floor general. If he needed to slow it down and kind of get everybody in tune, he could do that. But Schroeder is more that, just give me the ball and let's go. And that scares me. Also, the unknowns with Dwight. Is he going to return back to his form as you saw him when he was dominant in Orlando? I don't think that's possible.
He's not that player anymore, Colby.
Right. And that's what I think people need to see. But at the same time, I still think they have, the firepower. If everything does work out, I think they can be a 5 or 4th place team.
I mean, just based on their coach alone, they can be the 4,
Yeah, exactly.
But is it a team that, like, I would say is better than Indiana? Probably not. Dwight Howard, he's not the same player. I mean, like, his legs aren't what they were, just to start off the equation. His second jump used to be so incredibly high. And that's not there anymore, and that's why he averages like 2.5, 3 rebounds less a game than he did when he was in Orlando.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, too.
He's fallen off to it's a very high level, obviously. He's still one of the better big men in the league. But his rim protection numbers last year weren't as good as Jason Smith's in Orlando, So
I have
ignoring a lot of things with Dwight Howard when they go ahead and say he's still a top-tier center because he's not,
Yeah, well, let me get your opinion on this, though, because I'm a believer of this. So, yes, his defensive numbers did drop off significantly from what they were in Orlando. But do you think it was because he just simply, number one, Houston had terrible defensive philosophies, rotations, just the coaching in Houston, obviously with JB Bickerstaff, wasn't the strongest. Also, Howard wasn't getting the ball where he wanted an offense. He wasn't feeling involved. At least that's the vibe I kind of get from it. We both know that when a big man is getting involved the way he wants, it really impacts his defensive presence. Do you think that played a role into his decline in numbers as well?
I mean, I don't think people really are giving Jameer Nelson enough credit for what he did for Dwight Howard, really, when it comes right down to it. Mm-hmm. He was a much better guard to pair with Dwight Howard than James Harden for Dwight Howard's purposes. His assist numbers were never crazy high, but a lot of his assists were shots that he threw up there knowing Dwight would slam home, and he did. So those were deflated numbers, really, and Turkoglu played a big role in the offense too, of course. But it's just, Dwight used to be the kind of talent that could play off the ball a little more and function better in pick and rolls, and now he really needs his post touches. And if he gets them in Atlanta, I mean, he'll return to being a productive center again, but he's never going to average more than 20 points a game again. Those days are gone.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that, and I've said to everybody, this Hawks team is certainly Paul Millsap's team. I don't think there's any question about that. He is the best player on that team. He's going to lead them to however far they advance next season. Kind of moving on from that, and if you want to bring up any teams, feel free, but I wanted to get just your opinion on this. So the two kind of most talked about teams in the East that, they weren't present in the top 8, of course, the Chicago Bulls and the New York Knicks, with the moves that they made over the summer. Both teams are slated for 38.5 wins, according to the Las Vegas Superbook. Which
was the same they gave Orlando, was it not?
Let me just double check really quick. Orlando actually got 36.5.
Okay.
So before we touch on the Magic, because I definitely want to get to that since that's your forte, who do you think has the better chance of getting to that 38.5 number, Chicago or New York?
Oh, wow. I'm trying not to pick this on the basis of sentimentality, which would lead me towards New York. But New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's where I am too, just because I feel like I hate to use this analogy again, but if all those dominoes fall in the right place, I think they can really be a good team. Not a great team, but a good team.
They can scare a team in the first round. That's the best they can.
Yeah, and with Chicago, their glaring weakness in shooting, I think it's just going to be such a problem. Like now, obviously, they're not even, like Indiana has way more shooting than Chicago. We're not even comparing those two. But I just feel like they're gonna depend on Mirotic and McDermott way too much this season to kind of stretch the defense, and I don't think they're those type of players. I mean,
No,
yes,
neither of them are good enough at getting open on their own.
right, exactly. And I mean, yes, I mean teams are gonna sink in on when they play against the Bulls with Dwayne Wade, Rondo, Butler with their driving abilities. But at the same time, I've seen. And I don't watch 82 games of Chicago Bulls, every year. I don't even watch 25 games.
Yeah.
But I see a good amount, and I'm sorry, but Mirotic just hasn't impressed me, or as if I was a coach, put the fear in me that we need to stay glued on him.
Yeah, it's something with the European mindset I see where they fade in and out of games more than domestic players.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point as well. And then McDermott, he had flashes that he could really do something, but I don't want to be this guy, but I just feel like he's just soft. He's just soft-minded.
It's almost like he doesn't realize what he could do,
Right.
And when you see the ones that really take advantage of it and do, like I just mentioned Turkoglu a few minutes ago, and the ones that really get it and stay engaged, they kill. I mean, like Kukoc,
Yeah.
There's been enough of them that certainly have just sliced their way up through the NBA and done the same things they did in Europe. But Mirotic doesn't appear to have that engagement to do it.
No, and I'm interested to see how kind of Hoiberg answers in this season, how he kind of draws a system up for these type of players. I mean, obviously it's going to be a lot of just drive and dish and attack right off the dribble. But with Rondo and Wade, so such ball dominant guards, I'm just not sure how this works. I just really don't.
When it comes to Wade, I didn't realize he's not even a bad three-point shooter. He's a horrible three-point shooter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no.
He shot 15% from three last year. Colby, I mean, tell me you couldn't do that left-handed.
Yeah, well, everybody's basing it off of his postseason shooting performance. Well, I don't have the exact number in front of me, and I know
52% in the playoffs, but that was one damn series. That's like small sample theater, extraordinary. You can't base a season off one playoff series. He shot the ball horribly last year.
Exactly.
And he's now 28% for his career because of it. And 28% is also a mark that, you're cringing when the guy tees up.
Right. And I just don't, Butler has glimpses where he can knock down a three or two throughout the course of a game, but he's not a guy that's going to scare you. And when he's pulling up for a hesitation dribble, you're thinking, okay, he's pulling up from three. He's most likely going to put the ball on the floor again and try to attack the rim or get in the mid-range area.
I think he's peaked as a player too.
Oh yeah,
I do. I don't think
that's a good. That's a hot take. Tell me more.
I just think that what you're seeing from Butler offensively is the most he's ever going to be able to give you. As a defender, he's already one of the best in the league, and he can maintain that. But I don't see Butler making any kind of next leap and ever averaging more than 25 points per game ever in his career.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a comfortable prediction as well. I mean, it just doesn't seem like he has the versatility, I would say, like within his moves and physically dominant. Like, so, when LeBron, you can say LeBron can go out there and average 28 a game year in and year out. But I think that, a big reason because of that is just because of his physicality. He doesn't have to depend on a jump shot. He can just bully you right to the rim every time down the floor if he really wanted to.
There's something to be said for having one particular aspect of your game that's extremely dominant.
Yeah.
And that's what makes people like Carmelo Anthony such a good scorer,
Yeah,
it's not being one-dimensional. It's being extremely gifted at one particular thing and utilizing it to the best of your ability.
And a great way to kind of transition into the mix. Speaking of Melo, I mean, what do you think about this, Brett? I mean, do you think that he can lead them into the playoffs? I mean, I know
that's the most that can happen. I don't think that the Knicks are constructed to win a title anytime soon. But they're too good to just tear it down at the same time. And you got Porzingis, so you got a franchise young type of player to build around as the thing unwinds. But like as sad as it is to say, I don't think Carmelo Anthony is ever going to win a ring in his career. I wrote that like 5 seasons ago, and unfortunately, it's just turned out to be true.
Yeah, and I mean, you've known me for the past year or two. I'm a big Melo guy from Baltimore, and I kind of watched him growing up and tried to, pat my game after his, just shooting wise. And it's sad to see. I mean, here's the one thing, though. The one criticism that I don't agree with that people kind of say is that he isn't a championship type of player. I just simply don't agree with that.
It's not really it. It's situational. It's entirely situational.
Right. And we've said this before. He has not played with a point guard in their prime in his career. Honestly, I mean, he's played with a rundown Allen Iverson. 38 at the time? Maybe Jason Kidd. Something like that. And other than that, the best point guard you can argue is maybe Chauncey Billups. And you saw what they did with that. He was, one game away from advancing to the finals.
Right.
That'll be interesting to see how that unravels. But of course, with this team, it's injuries.
I feel like he chose a city over a championship, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with that. It might change up as his career, unfolds and it continues to, kind of go down the stretch third base, and he sees that ring like join up. I feel like that's the only way he wins a ring is if he joins forces with another dominant team. He
could have got it done if he had gone to Chicago instead of re-upping in New York.
Yeah, and even people with that, they say, even if he did do that, they still wouldn't be a title contender because Melo's not a championship player. Or a caliber player. I mean, I don't know if these people don't watch.
I don't buy that at all. All you have to do is watch his one season at Syracuse to know that's not true.
Exactly. Or watch all these USA games. I mean, he plays off of the superstars. If you can just sit Melo out on the perimeter and just depend on him to shoot threes or transition threes, of course he's going to be one of the most efficient shooters in the game. But with the teams that he plays on now, he's dependent upon to do so much on the offensive end.
Yeah.
Real quickly before we get to the West, because I definitely want to get to that as well. I want to get your feel on Milwaukee. I know people are pretty high on them just because of their youth, and you have the Greek Freak, you have Jabari Parker. Hopefully he can stay healthy again. Made a couple of moves in the offseason, nothing really to bat your eyes at or anything, but they are projected 39.5 wins. I personally don't have them in the playoffs. I think they missed out on it again. What about you?
I wrote on Milwaukee, and I think the title that I gave to the article kind of said for itself. The enigmatic squad that you cannot sleep on, which is really all they are to me,
Yeah.
There's a lot of really interesting players on that roster, and it's constructed in a unique way. They have a great coach in Jason Kidd, and Chris Middleton is one of the better two guards in the league that no one ever even seems to talk about. But I haven't seen enough there yet that I'm just going to say, oh, yeah, they're a playoff team. 39.5 wins is probably about the top of what I see them at, and maybe 41 at the absolute top. I don't like their point guard situation. Michael Carter-Williams isn't that great, and Della Vadova is one of the players that's most hated in the league, but at least he can shoot the ball decent. They added Terry. He can shoot the ball too. Miles Plumlee gives them an athletic front court player, which they kind of needed because Greg Monroe, for what he is, he's pretty limited defensively and on the boards as well at times. He's not a bad rebounder, but I like – they made a lot of small additions like that will probably make a bigger difference than people expect. But I just don't see them as any kind of lock for the playoffs, certainly by no stretch of the imagination when I say that.
No, and I've seen a lot of Bucks stuff on Twitter, and they want to do all they can to cut ties with Greg Monroe. He just doesn't fit there. His playing style just doesn't fit there. I think he can offer a team a lot with his skill set at his position. And then another guy that I really like and I think is one of the most underrated players in the league, Chris Middleton, of course, just how efficient he is and how he can impact the game on both ends. I think he has another big year. But the big question marks are with this team is I just think it's if Parker can stay healthy because I think he has a huge impact on this team. Greek Freak's gonna do what he does. I think he has an all-star season next season. But I think he really takes off just raw numbers wise, especially if Kidd continues to play him at the point guard position, which we saw. It was almost it was scary watching at the end of that. At the end of last season, him facilitate an offense and lead the break every time down. But I mean, and then also if you wanted to touch on the Magic real quick and see, I didn't know if you agreed with their 36.5 win projection. They kind of had
exactly what I gave them. That's exactly what I gave them. 36.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it was I'm going to tell you from an outsider's point of view, and then you can kind of break it down real quick before we move to the West. I thought their offseason was very confusing. Made me scratch my head a lot and just wonder, honestly, what they're doing. Kind of stacking the front court. But, I mean, I've talked to you, plenty of times about it, and you kind of brought me back down to earth and kind of see a more realistic path, I guess, for where they're going. So, just kind of explain to the people what they try to accomplish this offseason.
It's the last 4 seasons for Orlando, there's been a horrible problem with front court defense. Teams have just battered them, power forward after power forward, center after center. And Rob Hennigan got sick of it, and the Magic fans got sick of it. But Rob Hennigan reacted double time of what anyone would expected when he added Serge Ibaka and Bismack Biyombo. Those are 2 of the best rim defenders in the league, but did he necessarily need to add both? Could he have just added Serge Ibaka and left Vucevic as the starting center? I think a lot of people expected that to happen. I certainly did. And now there's the crowded front court, but you're looking at a front court that really only has one great scorer in it, and that's Vucevic. Or Ibaka can score, but he's not going to put up 20 a game like Vucevic can easily. Vucevic effortlessly puts up 20 a game. So I don't know that they can get rid of him off the roster and after losing Tobias Harris and after losing Victor Oladipo, maintain the type of scoring that would be necessary to say, okay, he's expendable now. I don't think he is. So that creates a lot of different problems in and of itself because now you have a backup center because you really do have to start Vucevic for his scoring, and you have a backup center in Biyombo who's making $16 million a year.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my next question. You already answered was what do they do with Vucevic? Just because, like you said, they needed his offensive production.
Yeah, there's nothing they can do yet. They're absolutely trapped right now. The roster has horrible balance on it. There's not enough shooters. Hazonia has to basically double what he did last year in year 2, and that's asking a lot. Meeks would have to have a career season. Fournier would have to also have a career season and average over 20 a game. And if all those best case things happen, Orlando sniffs the playoffs. That's the best case scenario.
Yeah,
but I don't think they will. I think it's another year lottery, and that'll be 5 in a row of non-playoff basketball in Orlando, and that's kind of like the limit for fans. Really it is. After 5 years, you get a lot of diehard fans that they don't write off the team, but the same tenacity of support begins to waver.
Yeah, well, I mean, and rightfully so. I mean, but it's just tough that Orlando just hasn't been able to really land that big name free agent, even though they have gone after him. I mean, that's the one thing as a loyal fan. If I was a loyal fan of the Magic, you have to respect. I mean, their name is always, at least in the preliminary, rounds, if you will. They're always involved in a big name free agent. I remember when the news broke, I was actually talking to you with Paul Millsap when he was kind of down between the Magic and the Hawks.
I was thrilled that morning. I think I remember that now. I had to write a piece. I was in a hotel, and I had to scribble something up before we hit the road.
Yeah, well,
by that afternoon, it broke that he was back in Atlanta, and I was like, well, there's that.
Yeah, and that would have been a huge gift for Orlando. I mean, arguably one of the best top 4 power forwards in the game. I mean, he's so versatile and so quietly great. It's almost sickening. But
it would have been perfect. He would have been a perfect fit in Houston when they were looking for a power forward too.
Yeah, for sure. But no, going back to what you're saying, I do think guys like Fournier, Hazonia, they all have to have career years, and I think that's asking a lot. The one thing that I do think will work out for the Magic that people kind of aren't seeing is that I really think Serge and Vucevic can have a pretty effective connection, high-low wise. I mean, we saw Ibaka. He's really not a guy that likes to operate on the block anyway, even in his time in OKC. So I think with him and Vogel, I think he'll instill a lot of high pick and pop situations, and maybe they can get something going high-low between him and Vucevic. But other than that, like you said, I think they're a long shot for the East, especially considering about all the teams that improved exponentially in the East. I think it makes their argument even tougher to make.
Yeah, I like, and with the Magic, I always try to keep my expectations realistic because you talk about free agency and how they've built their teams in the past and so on and so forth. Both times they've reached the finals, in 95 and in 2009, it was because of a number 1 draft pick.
Yeah.
First Shaquille O'Neal and then Dwight Howard. And they've had some big signings. They signed Tracy McGrady and Grant Hill one summer, and Tracy McGrady became the best player in the league for 3 or 4 seasons there.
Yeah.
But that's overall the way that a team like Orlando is, and all these smaller market teams ultimately make their aim is to have these star players in their earliest seasons.
Right. I mean, that
is what it is. Minnesota's in the same boat right now.
Yeah, that's the ideal situation. And once again, I'm going to credit you for the another great transition that leads us into the West. Real quick, I just want to run down the top 8 again. We got Warriors at 1, Spurs at 2, Clippers at 3, Jazz at 4, Blazers at 5, Thunder at 6, Grizzlies at 7, and Rockets at 8. Just initial thoughts on that top 8.
Well, I think everybody that's looking at this would love to see the Timberwolves slotted in that 7 or 8 spot, but I don't think it's going to happen yet.
Yeah.
There's not enough experience between their star players, and the West is still, the East is deeper, but the West is still very, very top heavy. And the Rockets, let's face it, are a number 3 team in the East, and they're a number 8 in the West. That's a pretty arguable point, of course, but looking at what they have on this Westgate projection, I agree with it pretty much all the way through. I said I'd probably flip the Jazz and Clippers, but there's no real – I'm not strong on that. The Blazers are the 5th. Yeah, I don't know that the Grizzlies continue to just muddle along at this 7 and 8 seed thing. Maybe they finally fall off and the Mavericks sneak in as another team that's really in the same boat anyway. But the Warriors are still the toast of the West, and they've only gotten better. The Spurs are still the Spurs. They added Gasol to make up for Duncan's loss, which is an upgrade in some senses. Even for all what Tim Duncan was, Paul Gasol has more left in the tank at this point in his career, and Aldridge is still there. It's pretty spot on, really.
Yeah, I agree with you. One hot take that I did hear, and he's pretty strong on it. Again, I was talking with Troy Tauscher yesterday. He has the Grizzlies as, I believe, number 3, which I was kind of scratching my head at, just because, yeah, I know they added Chandler Parsons, and I know Gasol's coming back. Conley obviously got the huge deal, but to me, they don't scream top team in the West to me. I think they're caught still in that playing style that just isn't valid in today's league. I mean, I think they get run out of the gym, even by teams.
No, it's not
what'd you say?
Zach Randolph is an anachronism. It's fine.
Yeah, and like even like I was gonna say, like even like the teams like the Nuggets, who should improve this season, just by younger teams like that, they're gonna get run out of the gym. I think that's something that's going to be really that they're going to struggle with. I mean, I still think they somehow make the playoffs, but yeah, going back to the Minnesota point, I mean, Las Vegas has them at 41.5 wins, which is a 11-12 game increase on their season last season, which is huge. I mean, that's a huge improvement. I'm with you on the boat that I think it takes this year to kind of prepare their run for the coming years. I don't think they all of a sudden just take that next step and all of a sudden are a team to be reckoned with in the West. I think they cause some teams some problems for sure, but I don't think they by any means are going to make a run at the 5th or 6th seed. I mean, Tim Bontemps of the Washington Post has been very outspoken that he thinks they're a 50-win team.
They have 50-win talent, just not yet.
Yeah, yep, and that's exactly what it is. It's just a lot of raw talent right there. I think once Tibbs gets his teeth sunk into them, and he's playing, Towns and Wiggins, 48 minutes a night, I guess. Maybe they'll be able to get some wins, but it kind of, I bet it shocked some people that they weren't included in the top 8. Houston's interesting to me as well. I think they make it, but God, they're going to be so terrible to watch defensively this year.
Well, I think they're regular season juggernauts. I think they could easily finish in position for a 5 or a 6 seed and then proceed to do nothing in the playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, that's where it's going to get exposed when the game's kind of really slowed down and teams have to depend on their defense. I want to touch on the Jazz real quick because I've never been a person that's high on the Jazz, but it's kind of impossible not to be now with their young talent and their acquisitions this offseason. I think it was exactly what they needed. Before we went on live, and I believe you may have mentioned it, that the Jazz, could be a top 3 team in the West. What's your reasoning for that, I guess?
They have a really well-constructed basketball team. There's with that roster. Gordon Hayward is a great playmaker and can take over games and is due to make an all-star team. It'll happen eventually. I don't know how long it's going to take, maybe this year. And Derek Favors has certainly improved without many people seeming to have noticed. He's not the guy he was early in his career in New Jersey. He's a hell of a power forward now. Gobert is one of the best defensive centers in the league, if not the best. And, they added the veteran components they needed, like Joe Johnson. I just don't see that there's anything in that roster that you can say, you know what, Utah really needs to add player or do this. They're just a really well put together basketball team, and I think now's their time. The fact that now being their time doesn't really put them in the cusp of the true contenders would concern me if I were a Utah fan to some degree.
Yeah, and not to mention, I don't know, I'm not sure if you included this in when I first asked you, but the emergence of Rodney Hood. I mean, that guy just killed it last year. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know he was kind of mid-teens, maybe even upper teens averages scoring wise. He was really a versatile scorer as well. He can hit the outside shot. He can finish over the rim. I think he adds that dynamic. If there was because people always kind of go right at, well, how is Gordon Hayward going to be a number 1 option on your team? And I really don't feel like it's like that. I feel like they're a team filled with solid scoring options, but not one elite scorer. So I think Hood's a good complement to Hayward out on the perimeter. And then, like you said, with their additions this offseason, getting George Hill, once again, a calming presence at the floor general that they needed. I think that was their biggest argument the past couple of seasons. They just did not have a point guard. I mean, who was running for it last year? Shelvin Mack? I mean, You simply can't have that and expect a winning product. So
Shelvin Mack in Utah, for some reason they really loved him there.
Yeah, they really did. I mean, he's a respectable player. I mean, he's a guy who can play some valuable backup minutes, but by no means is a starter in especially in the Western Conference with all those elite point guards. I mean, he's going to get There's no question about it.
He was a patch. Is what he was.
Yeah, and real quick, another argument that people are making are kind of that the Clippers are the team that are best equipped to take down this super team that is the Warriors, which I agree with. But I'm with Las Vegas on this one, that the Spurs are going to finish second in terms of the standings. I've heard a lot of people kind of feel like they're going to drop off for whatever reason. I mean, I feel like they're a guarantee. You can pencil them in at number 2 and at worst the number 3 spot in the West standings. They add Pau Gasol, like you said. He's not anywhere. I think where they kind of lack is that the quarterbacking on defense that Duncan brought. But in terms of getting the job done, Pau Gasol can do the same things defensively that Duncan can do, and he's more efficient, more versatile offensively, especially shooting the 3. So I think they take a big step. And then there's other teams that we could touch on, but we're kind of running out of time. Real quick, just to end, kind of bring this our first episode to an end. Golden State, they're predicted 66.5 wins. I want to get your opinion on, I'm just going to ask the cliche question. Do you think they try and make a run at 74 to break their 73-win season last year?
No, I think they removed the focus from that fairly quickly, too, even if they start out hot. I don't think the players want to live with that kind of pressure. I think 68 wins, more than 66.5 is reasonable enough. And I think that seeing a 73-win team not win the title was a wake-up call enough for people to, for Curry and company to know that maybe resting a little bit during the regular season isn't a bad idea, things like that. I don't think that they want to make the focus have anything to do with that. As quick as they can establish that, the better they are.
Yeah, I think, and I also think Steve Kerr learns from this, and kind of you see throughout the season, they go for a stretch. So if they're at a long, road trip, one game Curry rest, one game Durant rest, one game Thompson, one game Green.
You got to do that when you have that much talent, and you can take advantage of it. Greg Popovich doesn't play his stars down the stretch of the season.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about it is, even if they were to kind of rotate those stars resting, I still think they're a 66-win team. I mean, that's the scary part of it. So when they're all healthy and all rolling on all cylinders, which should be the first round of the playoffs if you want to do it in the most strategical way, they're just going to be an unstoppable force. I am really excited to see, I think we can both agree that it's the early prediction is Warriors-Cavs rematch in the finals. And just seeing these teams try to load up to beat LeBron. I mean, I know he just won last year since, his years with the Heat, but the team from the Eastern Conference that is going to be waiting for whoever in the West is going to be the Cavs, led by LeBron James. And I'm just excited to watch him take on yet another juggernaut, because I'll tell you what, if he takes on this Warriors team and wins the title, I think he's got a very strong argument for the best player ever. I mean, what else can you do?
Yeah, I think at this point the NBA has become very predictable. We're all expecting a Warriors-Cavs rematch. But what is more interesting than its predictability is that people seem okay with that. Everybody's ready to watch more of the same and see more greatness, because this last finals was one of the greatest we've ever seen. And the one before, with LeBron going by himself without Kyrie Irving and without Kevin Love, and nearly winning the MVP by himself in a losing effort. I think what 5 out of 13 votes was it on the MVP?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's somewhere around that.
So to get 5 out of 13 on the losing team, and basically, I think that was probably one of the single-handed greatest performances I've ever seen since watching from '89 onwards, basically. No, his greatness isn't really in question, but I think when you start talking about the greatest ever argument, it really smacks in the face of a lot of great players that you just can't compare to anyone anyway. Because certainly you can pose an easy argument that Wilt's the greatest ever, or Jordan. And there's other guys that can even enter that conversation pretty easily, like Bill Russell and Jabbar. So to me, that I don't really like to necessarily get into overanalyzing who's the greatest ever when there's so many different types of talents that have come through the league. But he's up there with the most dominant, that's for sure.
Yeah, I don't think that's in question at all. So just to wind down, I want to thank you. Like I said, for the people, Brett and I will be throwing one of these at you, hopefully once a week, if not once every other week. And if there's more stuff going on in the league, maybe we get multiple times a week. Just a place for us to kind of unwind, talk hoops. So definitely send questions, send topics to talk about, anything, and we will be sure to cover them. Brett, just real quick before we sign off, if you want to plug anything that you have coming up in the future, mention your Twitter name so people can follow you. What do you got coming up?
3-guard rotation. I believe tomorrow night we'll be looking at DeMarcus Cousins in depth. So 3guardrotation.blogspot.com. We'll have the podcast. I'm probably going to have some kind of little prelude DeMarcus Cousins piece, because for some reason he seems to be the name that we keep coming back to, is like, something's got to change, something's got to give. And it's just too much talent to watch be wasted away. So DeMarcus Cousins is the feature focus of the 3-guard rotation right now.
Great. Yeah, I'll definitely be tuning in and reading on what you have going on there. It's definitely an interesting storyline. Is he going to finally get away from the Sacramento franchise that is doomed his career? I mean, he's a great player. I've even been pushed for him to come to Washington with John Wall, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
It'd be a deal, but it wouldn't. We'll never get what we want. So
Right, exactly. So definitely, guys, be on the lookout for that. You can also follow Brett at 33 Trigger on Twitter. Definitely do that as well. It's a good basketball follow. You can follow me on Twitter at Colby Giacubeno. Good luck trying to spell my last name.
Why don't you just go back to Colby G again? That was so much easier for me.
I know. That might be the new transition. I might have to do that.
I might have to go back to that.
Yeah. You can find my work on hoopshabit.com. I'm still proceeding with my best case scenario pieces. Next up, Chicago Bulls. So be on the lookout for that. I also, am covering the Atlanta Hawks beat for Soaring Down South. So be sure to tune in what's going on in Atlanta. But other than that, thank you for listening to the first episode. We will be back at you next week. For Brett Roberts, I am Colby Giacubeno, guys. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your week.